Heart Coherence Collaborative. We are so excited to have Paul Selig back with us again. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Paul Selig is considered to be one of the foremost spiritual channels working today. In his breakthrough works of channel literature, author and medium Paul Selig has recorded an extraordinary program for personal and planetary evolution as humankind awakens to its own divine nature.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I have loved you for so long, and when you originally came on with us, Kyle had said who would be your dream guest to have. So it was a dream come true to have you with us the last time, and I'm so happy that you're going to be here again, and we can talk a little bit about Resurrection, which is the most recent book. So I would love to hear you just talk about what the purpose has been of all the last books and what the new purpose is for Resurrection, which is the first in the Manifestation trilogy.
I'll see if I can answer this. The very first book was dictated through me in 2009, published in 2010. And in some ways, I think the DNA for all the books that followed is present there. But they're taking us to a level of realization, which is knowing in an experiential way in this new series, which they're calling the Manifestation Trilogy. They're not talking about manifestation in terms of getting what you want or what you think you should have, but they are talking about how at a level of alignment, they call it the true self or the monad or the divine self, the divine spark within us, in its realized state, calls all things to it at a level of coherence from what they call the upper room, which they say is the next level up, or it's the octave of tone above the common field that we know ourselves in. So we're always manifesting because that's just the nature of being. We're always calling to us what we expect to receive, either through individual awareness or collective agreement of what we expect to be. And when you get to this level of demonstration or manifestation, you're actually having a whole other experience of being, of what you require being really claimed with you or for you, at a higher level. So it's not about getting, it's about receiving. In the work of the current trilogy, they're also talking about how a world is made new through coherence, through the realization of the inherent divine that they say is implicit in all manifestation but has been ignored. And they speak about how that's done, and really done through presence in being, not through trying and fixing and trying to get our way or change what we think shouldn't be there, because most of those assumptions are still based in our ideas of what was and who we're supposed to be based on some, prior collective agreement of what it means to be a human being, or means to be anything. So they're really talking about a whole other way of being in the world, and a whole other way of being in, I suspect, relationship to source. Call it whatever you want.
Thank you. Yeah, the guides talk a lot about how you get what you choose, and they say how you can change your radio station. I'm curious if they've ever talked about how we actually change our radio station at an energetic level. Is that through changing our emotional expression?
No, I don't necessarily. I don't know. They haven't spoken of it in those terms. So, when I work as a channel, I'm operating as a radio. I'm in transmission. The broadcast is the guides. We're all of us, they say, radios, and we're always in transmission. And our transmission is our consciousness, and that's what we hold. And it's also born out of what we believe and what we expect. So, the emotional self, in some ways, I suspect is reactive to stimuli. But the programming, I guess, and this isn't, I don't know how they would teach this, and I think it might be too early in the morning for me here on Maui channel. But, basically, they're talking about how we're made new through a new level of alignment. And being made new isn't saying that there's something wrong with who we were. It's just that we've misidentified with our personality self and our historical experience, which we think is who we are. And so when you move to the higher level, which is the true self in expression, you're not necessarily operating from the old program. So you're not having the same level of reactivity, I suspect, that you might otherwise. So how one changes their coherence or their vibration is done through the work that they teach. And there are lots of ways that people can do it. You don't need my guides to do it, but they do have a very clear way of instructing us through attunement. And the attunements are spoken language that they say is encoded with vibration. And it's why when you work with the attunements that the guides bring, most people feel it and then begin to have the experience that the attunements confirm. So when you move to the upper room or that level of alignment, there are a set of attunements that are really about being there and knowing the source of all things. You're not trying to find it or fix it, you're being. So I don't know if I answered that, but we're always creating and we're all radios and we're always getting, they say, what we expect, high, low, and in between. We're basically getting what we think we should or what we've been told we should expect. And that's true at a level of manifestation. Huh?
It's scary and hopeful at the same time.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's scary. You know, I don't really think it's scary. I mean, you know, for for a long time, the guides have said things, you don't get to be a victim and a master at the same time. You don't, there are two different ways of honoring yourself, I suspect. But, the aspect of you or anyone that knows who it is, who he, she is, which is the aspect of you that knows, is also the aspect of you that knows who the divine is in all. You really can't be the light and hold another in darkness, which they've said so many times. And it's a very simple teaching, but it's very, very true. So the idea that we're always getting what we expect, I mean, it's kind of true. And they talked about this in a book called The Book of Knowing and Worth, about how we all have these frames, and the purpose of a frame is to fill itself with what we expect. So if my frame is people stink, I'm going to have a lot of stinky people because I'm going to confront it, because we're basically always getting what we're anticipating. And when you open the frame to include more, there's much, much, much more available. And the true self, they say, doesn't hold the old frame. The old frame is born through history or our idea of what was. And much of our idea of what was is basically what we were instructed in or how we were taught. So what the guides are teaching now, in the book that they've since channeled since resurrection was completed, they're talking about the reclamation of memory itself and how we're doing the best we can, but everything that we anticipate is born in an idea of what was. And it's not that those things didn't happen, but that the filter that we use for memory is actually born through a lens of separation. So if you've lived your whole life believing that you're separate from source, which most of us have lived that way, cultures live that way, all of our memories are informed by that miscomprehension. And so the reclamation of memory is just really clearing the filter of separation, which is fear. Separation is fear, that's all.
Can you talk a little bit more about how humanity came and really there is some choice for God to know itself through this illusion of separation?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, that's a question for the guides. I'm just, I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a guru. I could care less. I'm so not interested in that stuff. I sit in a chair and I take dictation, and occasionally I will answer questions about the guides' teachings as I understand them. When they talk about separation, they talk about it's basically, it's an illusion, but it's a hell of an illusion. So our reality here, born in separation, is true at the level of tone or vibration that we're in accord to, but it's not always true. And the guides say what is true is always true. So when you move to the higher level of vibrational accord, you begin to really pierce the veil of separation, or it begins to dismantle, because it was never really true to begin with. But you see, the guides say you know, it's God as all things, not just as the things that we like or approve of or fit our politics or our idea of how people should behave. That's very convenient, but that's logic that's entrenched in a kind of history that's born in separation and a kind of dualism which they don't teach. So I understand the belief in separation coming from a sense of lack, and there's not going to be enough, so we have to hoard what we have. And when we do that, we forget our source of supply. And when we forget our source of supply, we've created a boundary or a wall of separation, and we continue that separation and replicate it again and again and again. And so we've done this. Now, is the divine available to us? Yes, always, is my understanding, but we have to align to it or claim it or choose it at some level, which is what I understand free will to be, or the high use of free will. You know, I was raised sort of an atheist. I was raised to believe that this stuff was for really stupid people, you know, and no, it's just how I was born. We went to therapy. We didn't, you know, go to church or synagogue or anything. We just didn't, you know, it wasn't part of my world. I was a New York City kid growing up, you know, in the 60s and the 70s, and it wasn't part of the world. And it was only when I hit a real wall at the age of 25, and it was a real wall. I was, you know, being self-destructive. I was partying far too much, and I was staying in a hotel in St. Paul, working on a project there. And, you know, I didn't know where to get drugs in St. Paul, in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It was not a good night, put it that way. And, you know, the Gideons leave these little Bibles in the drawer. And I was like, well, I don't know. But I actually said a prayer, and it said prayer for people in crisis. I didn't know what the crisis was, but I knew I was in one, and I said it. And I meant it, and then I forgot about it. And 3 days later, I heard a voice telling me to get my act together. And I listened to it. That was the first voice. But I think it came because I had hit a place of willingness to consider something else, or at least to know that I couldn't fix this with the set of tools that I had been given. And that was my experience. It's not the same for everybody. But I know that for me, it's still a choice. You know, I still have what I want and what I think I should have and what I think the world owes me or should give me and all that stuff. And it's basically, none of it's true, you know, but it's just how I play the game. And when I do that, I pay a price for it. Mm-hmm. Much of my process now is about stepping out of the way and allowing, you can call it God or whatever you want to call it, allow God to be God, you know, which is really agreement. And they say agreement is vibrational accord, and vibrational accord is co-resonance. So to move into an agreement to that grants a somewhat different experience than if I think I'm stuck alone in a desert and there's no water and I better go find some quick and steal it from somebody if I don't have it, you know, which is when we get back into trouble. And I think we do that personally, and we do that collectively as well.
You talk a little bit about addiction, and then fear. And from what I've learned through my background in addiction is that the root of a lot of people's addiction is the emotional realm, the fear, the resentments. And so I'm curious if you've ever thought about, are addicts or alcoholics more likely to be channels because they're more empathic? They're people that just feel things so heavily that they ultimately end up having to drown it out through substances.
I don't know that that's true. I mean, I have theories, you know. I do think, somebody once said to me early on that they thought that alcoholism was a low-grade spiritual search. And that made some sense to me. It's spirits, you know. I went, oh, that made some sense. And I know that in my own case, I've done everything that I possibly could to numb myself, whether I was a 4-pack a day smoker. I used to be very heavy. I mean, I drank too much. I mean, basically most things you can do that you can get in trouble with, I've probably done. And I think that those were all ways of checking out or not feeling or not having to experience my sensitivity. In my case, my psychic ability kicked in when I quit, and very quickly, and I didn't know what the hell to make of it. I was excited by it, but I was confused by it. And, this was happening concurrent with a new awareness of spirituality. So I was getting blindsided by these other possibilities that had not been part of how I thought of myself or the world. Um, I don't know. I mean, so I think, yeah, but I've known some really thick, dense, insensitive addicts too. So I don't think it's one size fits all. You know, somebody said to me years ago about gay guys, there's a lot of gay psychics. I'm one of them, that are out there in the world. And I don't know why that is. They call it the two spirits, in some cultures or whatever it is. Somebody was just talking about that the other night. But what I think is, in some ways, when you grow up feeling different from other people, you develop kind of psychically out of a sense of self-protection. You have to figure out how you're safe, where people are coming from. And I didn't understand in my own life that I didn't know that I was psychic. I had psychic dreams when I was a child that were accurate, a couple of them, and they were whoppers, and one big sort of experience of deja vu, seeing a place that I ended up working at when I was, 20 years later. It was the place I had dreamt about, and it was a very important part of my life. So these things were useful, but I didn't self-identify through them. And until I claimed that I had access to these things or understood that I did, because I don't think you can try to be psychic. People can study things. But if you understand that one's sensitivity is potentially an ally and not a detriment, it can become useful. And when you're very busy trying not to feel and not to be sensitive or not to be seen, because my thing was in some ways about hiding my light or hiding who I was because, I didn't want to get bullied, I didn't whatever, Once that stops being a motivating force, suddenly you have access to far more of yourself than you thought that you did. So my path had to do with addiction, but I don't know, a lot of psychics I know, and I know a lot of them now that are very good ones. Most of them have never had a problem with substances, but I will say many of us have had significant trauma early in life. And, I have a friend, Laura Day, who's a very good psychic, who thinks that that's part of what makes us do what we do. There's some kind of, schism or some kind of thing that allows us access. I don't know how that works because it's not how I wasn't taught what I do. Everything that I do, I didn't know that I could do until I was doing it. And then I had to make some sense out of it. And I still make sense out of it,
Great answer.
Yeah, it makes me think about, there's such a clear distinction between who you are, Paul, and what you channel. And I wonder, it's almost really refreshing because when you are even receiving information, or sometimes they're specifically talking to you and saying, hey, he's thinking this or he's not understanding that, it makes it really easy to work with the material because there's a level of that the receiver, and I obviously become the receiver when I listen to or read your books.
Yeah.
There's this level where it's just easier, I think, to work with the information and to feel like you have some of the same concerns and questions that I would have. So I really appreciate that. But I wonder how you interact with the material and how it changes you. Sometimes there's instructions for processes or things to do. And I wonder how you interact with it and what's changed in you the most, or what you've changed in terms of, yes, like spiritual practices or interacting with other people.
Well, people want the tricks. People want the take home, the 5 things you need to do to become, and I just never operated that way. I think that's cultural and it becomes disposable. I mean, there are certain things that you do if you probably want to be healthy. You eat well, you take care of your body, you do whatever you need to do. There's practical things anybody can do with anything. But I don't know always that one size, fits all. I retain I channel a lot, and I channel longer than a lot of people do. So when the books are channeled usually over about 20 to 25 sessions, maybe 30. And the sessions can run a half an hour to an hour and a half each. And, you know, when I'm doing live events and they're done publicly, I might be doing, you know, 4 hours of just straight lecturing over the course of a day in front of an audience. I retain maybe a third of what comes out of my mouth. And there are times when it all sounds the same to me, and I'm going, here they go again, and I'm just trying to keep up. But my job is to take the dictation. You know, channeling, true channeling, and I think that people call channeling different things, but true channeling, I actually feel is a kind of stenography. You know, it's really, I'm like this court stenographer. I sit there and they just taking it down. Now, because I have my name on the cover of these books that I didn't write, I feel a weird sense of relationship to them. In other words, somebody says, I really love your books. I go, great. I didn't write them, you know, but I'm happy people are benefiting from the work. But I don't feel a sense of tremendous ownership, but my name is on the cover. So I do feel responsible at a level. So if they say something like, the moon is made of green cheese, you're going to hear me in the background go, hey, wait a minute. Yeah. And then they're going to have to unpack it. And mostly they do. And I'm grateful that they do. But then how it's affected my life. You know, people used to ask me this, and I would go, well, it has. I live a different life now. I live a completely different life now. And it's not that I don't have stuff that I worry about or problems, because I do, and I'm a human being, and I don't walk around saying I have ascended and you should listen to me. I don't, anybody that's saying that, I would mostly take some exception to, you know. I think people that are probably don't need to announce it. They're just doing it, you know, they're just being themselves. So I live a very different life. My experience of being in the world has been altered almost completely, you know, and I'm surprised by that. You know, some of it for me was practical. I mean, I ended up, you know, I wound up on Maui after basically a whole life in New York City, or nearly a whole life in New York City. I'm still learning to drive at my age, you know, and I'm terrible at it. I hate it, but I have to do it, or I live in the rainforest. I'm going to starve one of these days if I don't, you know, learn how to open up a coconut or get to Safeway, you know, I'm going to be in trouble. So, but my life is very different. And I think some of this is the integration of the teaching. What I began to experience in the last couple of years, something that the guides would speak about, which is sort of, you don't have to ask for things. They get to show up. You know, you get to be in co-resonance with what you need. So the whole idea of give me what I want a bigger this or a better that, and you know, there's nothing wrong with stuff, you know, at all. But I think when we move to a place of reception, which is allowance, we can receive. And the belief that I think that we've held is that we're not going to get what we need, or we have to fight for it or get there first, you know, or rip it out of somebody else's hands, or be the best so that everybody knows. It's, you know, all of that stuff starts to feel kind of stupid at a certain point. And maybe an interesting exercise, and maybe that's something that we all go through, you know, a kind of spiritual materialism. When I was new at this stuff, and this is in my early 30s, and I'm 61 now, and I was like, I'm special. Oh my God, I can do these things. And it was exciting for a little bit and kind of sexy. It actually never got me a date now that I look back on it. So it wasn't sexy, but you know, it was special, and I enjoyed the uniqueness of it. And now it's not. It's part of the way I show up in the world, just like you guys show up in the world this way. And I don't think it makes me more spiritual than anybody else. And the moment I start thinking that, I'm probably stepping on my own feet, you know, and being in my own spiritual pride. And I can fall into that, you know. But anyway, that's that. So, I mean, the practices you know, honestly, a big one really is the simplest one of all, which is gratitude. I really am mostly grateful. And I'm mostly surprised that I'm living a life that I don't think I would have known that I can have. And I really didn't. And I used to think, well, other people, you know, I said this recently in an Instagram or whatever, some social media post, but I had to write a little note to go with something. And I had been told by the guides, maybe 6 years ago, I was very unhappy, and I was working with somebody, and she said, "We're going to ask your guides what's wrong. You know, what's the problem?" I was like, "Oh, what am I going to, you know?" But I did it because I need somebody else to be asking. You know, I don't walk around getting information for myself. But if somebody's there and I can step back enough to be neutral, I can channel for myself. And the guide said, well, basically, Paul's job is to hold the doorway open for others. And she was like, oh, that's awful. I said, yeah, that's really terrible. So I was really upset. I don't want to hold the door open for others. But then I realized that the doorway, were the books. The books were coming through the doorway. And my job was to hold the space for the teaching. And then at the end of the Book of Mastery, I think that was the end of that book, the guides say the door is open and everybody gets to come through now, and you get to come through too. And that was a big thing for me. And then I think my life started to change radically. And I do think the books are the doorway. And I used to say, you know, the radio doesn't get to dance to the music, you know, and now I don't know that that's true. But my job was really to be there in service to the transmission. But I am benefiting, and I'm grateful for it. I'll leave it there.
Great answer. So you've helped a lot of people in relationships through your channeling. I'm curious, has there been any themes that have developed with what the guides are saying to those in relationships for relationship advice?
Well, there's not a lot of one size fits all stuff that they do say, but they will often say you have to forgive the other person for not being who you want or wanted them to be. Because that lets them off the hook and lets you off the hook, and that's mostly the problem. So if my partner betrays me, I don't want my partner to be the kind of person that can do that, but that's who they are or what they did, you know, and that's the reality. And then I can begin to work with that. You know, mostly it's about expectation and the expectations that we operate with. I don't know what they say because every relationship is different. The guides talk about relationships in their books a fair amount, but what you may be referencing is the psychic work that I do, which is different.
Yeah.
And when I work as a psychic, I'm a medium for the living, so I'm not going to hear your dead Aunt Ruth. But if Ruth is living, you know, in Passaic and you haven't talked to her for 3 years, I can probably tune into her. I might start to resemble her, and I can usually get accurate or provable information back and forth to support people in healing the rifts, or at least understanding them. A lot of people now say, well, I'm so spiritual, I've outgrown my relationship. And the guides often say, you know, your whole life is your spiritual life, and that's inclusive of your relationships. It doesn't mean the other person has to believe what you believe or do what you want. It also doesn't mean that you can't choose something other. We're always in choice. I think the key is what part of ourself is choosing, you know, which aspect of us is making choice. Is it the part of me that demands to be right? I mean, the guides say, and it's a simple one, self-righteousness is always the small self. And if you have to be right at the cost of somebody else being wrong, you're not going to have a great time with it. You know, it's just real simple stuff.
What do the guides say about, you know, in relationships, whether it's close romantic ones or with people in the world? They talk about holding things in darkness, and, you know, what you hold in darkness stays in darkness. So what's the way that you should interact with things that are hurtful, which is typically what you'd put in darkness. What's the better way to interact with that, to hold things in light?
Well, it's a simple premise. They say you can't be the light, and underline the word "be" is the one to underline. You can't be the light and hold another in darkness. It doesn't work. The lamp doesn't decide what it illumines. It just is. It's doing its job as the light. And when you bring the light to darkness, the darkness is dispelled. That's what changes things, and you don't bring the light to what you're denying or pretending isn't there. That's spiritual bypassing. It's a term that people use now. And I think, there's some accuracy there. So there's nothing about these teachings that I understand that are terribly convenient to the personality, but that doesn't mean that doesn't make it true. There's some old spiritual teacher who used to say, it's really easy to pray for the people you care about and you like, but you're not necessarily progressing when you're doing that. And when the guides talk about blessing something, they say it this way: what you damn, what you damn is just what you put in darkness. What you put in darkness calls you to that darkness. You've put it there in the darkness, so you're tied to it at that level. You're literally anchored to that very thing. What you damn damns you back. But they also say what you bless blesses you in return. Now, we live in a culture where we'll say, oh, I'm going to bless, bless my food, bless the victims of the terrible thing, whatever, unless you know what you're talking about, it's just language, just words. And to bless something, I understand, is to bring the presence of the divine, which the guides say is always there but has been denied. You bring the presence of the divine where it has been denied. You bring the light where, it seems lacking. That's what transforms things. And this isn't about what people want, which is, I think, well, I'm going to make things pretty. I mean, if you've got a house full of horse shit, you want to spray perfume on it, you're going to have perfumed horse shit. That's what you're going to have. And I don't think that's it. The guides said years ago, if you have a body buried in the basement, it's eventually going to stink up the whole house. So your job is to deal with what you got and what's been hidden in darkness. And what you put in darkness includes what you put in darkness within yourself, which is, it can be your shame, your anger, your confusion about some aspect or something that happened, or who you secretly hate or blame, all of those things. Now, it doesn't mean, there are people that I never want to see again, and I'm honest about it. But they have a right to be. I also have a right to say I don't want to be with you. And that's also up to me to do that. And maybe I have more work to do on these things. I'm not inviting people over to dinner that, have caused damage. But I gotta say, when we empower what we don't want by our hatred of it, we make it bigger and worse. We're actually contributing to the very structures that we don't like with our damnation or whatever. And people sometimes think, well, that means you approve of something. No, it doesn't. I think, murder is heinous, and the guides say it is murder is an act of the denial of the divine. You don't do that in awareness of the inherent divinity in another. It wouldn't occur to you to do that. You stop acting on the old at a certain level because you're not in agreement to it. An agreement isn't cultural or political agreement. It's just vibrational accord. Like it wouldn't, if you have, I don't know, if you have enough, I suppose it never occurs to you to try to take it from somebody else that, so that it doesn't, why would you, And if you know what the source is and you can bring that or claim that where it's been denied, you're actually supporting the realization of the new, which is what the guides are teaching in these books.
So if you're like in a relationship, oftentimes you hear like people are in this honeymoon stage where everything's so easy, and then they've been with each other for a certain period of time, and some things come up that are really bothersome. But what you're saying is if you, and I'm asking you, is this what
Uh-huh.
you're, if you start pointing out the flaws in your partner and labeling them as this way, you will ultimately receive more of that.
Well, no, I mean, you've already made your partner wrong in doing that and deciding that he or she is not who they should be to
Mm,
serve you.
yeah.
Um, you know, I snore. I'm single, so nobody knows I snore, you know, but maybe one day if I'm not single, somebody will say, you've got to deal with that thing. And then I might have to deal with them if I want to share my bed. You know,
Mm,
I'm sure it's probably wouldn't be pleasant for somebody who is trying to sleep when I'm snoring. But so, you know, yeah, you will exacerbate if you focus on the one blemish uh,
mm,
that you know you can't get over, then that's what you're focusing on, and it's kind of like then that becomes if you're going to magnify it. I mean, certainly. Um, you know, I think that people can have their preferences. People can have some people like blondes, some people like brunettes, some people like men, women. Is you know, people are going to do what people are going to do. But I don't think you can make somebody else wrong for being who they are.
mm.
And I suspect, and this is coming from a single person who needs a date, so you know I'm not available, but I kind of think that if the purpose of a relationship is to be validated for who you think you're supposed to be or how you're supposed to be seen as, or the other person's supposed to operate as you demand they do, there's already going to be a rough road ahead. And the honeymoon period, I suspect, is when everything is forgiven, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that that's expected to fade. And then I think that the real work of a relationship begins,
Mm,
you know, and what's the basis of the relationship? I don't, you see, I think we live stupidly in a culture. I think we're spoiled in some ways. I do. And I think we want things to be easy and pretty and convenient.
mm.
You know, I really do. We want everything quick. So
Yeah.
I posted, I saw this on social media recently. It's like from 2 years ago, there was a paragraph. It was a decent sized, it was a good paragraph. And I read, that's a really good teaching. I'd forgotten about it. And then somebody said, can you reduce this to 3 phrases that I can take away? And I thought, man, read the damn paragraph. You
Yeah.
know, you want to make a meme of it, you can, but that's not how life operates.
Mm,
You know, there are gradations. Things aren't always pleasant or comfortable or easy. And
mm.
my real growth has come through some of the most difficult things I've ever been through. And I think that's probably true for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we're going towards the new, whether it's in relationships or just within ourselves and interacting with the world, I I actually choose to listen to your books rather than read
Mhm.
them. I had read in the beginning, I had read some of them of the
Uh-huh.
first trilogy. But I get so much out of the sound of it,
Yeah.
and I love the attunements. And so I'd love to hear you talk about, for anybody who's unfamiliar with them, what they
Mm.
are, and also what the new ones are for this book.
I don't know if I remember, because they've done a whole other book since.
Oh yeah.
So the very first attunement was the attunement to the word, which they brought through in a group that met in my apartment. That started when I was about 32, 33 years old is when they brought that through. I didn't know what the hell they were talking about, but they said, we're going to attune everybody to the word. And they said the word is the energy of the creator in action. And I had just had this freaky deaky thing, you know, with the it's for another time. I think it's in the beginning. It's in the introduction to the very first book. I explain how this whole started, but I'll save that now. But the attunement was spoken language that had an impact in the energetic field that was palpable. And you could speak it for yourself. You could speak it for the one in front of you. You could speak it for the room. Now, when I do big events, you can speak it for a few hundred people and everybody feels the energy shift in the room. So the books themselves that the guides write, and it's fine to listen to them, are energetic transmissions that work directly on the reader. The words the guides say provide an intellectual context for what's really going on, but what's really going on is the energetic transmission. And there is a series of attunements. The first series of books was bring us to that doorway to the upper room. And the last two trilogies seem to be about manifestation or the realization of the upper room in form, which is what happens at the level of physical reality in terms of one's beginning to experience an altered state of vibration and what comes with that. So each of the attunements, and most books have one, and they build one upon the next, is an invocation or an incantation, I guess you could say, of energy. But they're palpable. And it's kind of like, I used to look at it this way. It's like if you went to an old jukebox and you put D3 in the jukebox and the same song always plays.
Mm.
The attunements work a bit that way. It's like pushing the buttons and then you get the residual affect of the claim. You're going to have to integrate it though. So it's not quick fix. It's not like, oh, good, I'm going to say these magic words, and you're going to feel it probably, and then you're probably going to begin to experience the affect of it, which probably will move some of the stuff that's stood in the way of your ability to know those things or to realize them. I believe in the newest books, the claims are God is, God is one of them, which is a claim of the absolute. They say it refutes the denial of the divine. It's not God, the old man in the cloud, and it's not God, the God of religion. It's not just God as source of all. It just is, because all things, the guides say there is one note sung in the entire universe, and everything that we see is a manifestation or articulation of that one note. It's all playing out at different levels of tone and variance. And the other is, and I think this might be in the book that you just, Resurrection, I am known, I am known, I am known is invoked. And that's a really interesting when they really get into that more in the book that follows, which is called the Book of Innocence, which that comes out in the fall. But the claim I am known, which they've been working with for a while, but they've never really unpacked. They say, we're so busy trying to seek, to find, that we forget that we're already known. And the idea of being known, which is being realized, allowing Source to know you and have all aspects of you in agreement to it. It's nothing can be, the only things that are outside of Source, the guides say, are what we put there, what we put in darkness. And then we can have that experience of them. Even the darkness, the guides say, is Source. It just denies it, So I don't know. So the attunements are potent. They're there. There's a lot of videos of me channeling at this point up online where the attunements are invoked and available, and you can do them there. You don't need me. The audio books are good for, the books are essentially, they're all spoken. There's no writing. I don't write anything. The books are all spoken into being, and they're not edited. So maybe 3 words in any book gets altered because I misspoke the word, or I stumbled upon it, or was speaking so fast I dropped an "and," which clearly was intended to be there, but that's really rare. But when you listen to the books, in some ways you're having an authentic experience because it is a spoken teaching. They read like books, which I'm amazed by. Like you really can't tell that somebody was just sitting there with his eyes closed talking for all this time. But that's what happens.
I'm curious if group energy has changed your energy transmission at all throughout your journey.
I'm sure it has.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has. I mean, I can't do this alone, and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started this stuff, when I was maybe 32, 33 in my apartment, maybe 31, somewhere in there, I asked my old teacher who used to teach energy healing if I could do a group, expecting that I would do the meditations that she would teach. And when she said, yes, you may, I was very excited. And because she was, didn't support that often. But I thought that was really nice. And then all of a sudden my own work started coming through and I was like, what the hell is this? I started hearing the very first meeting. And the people that were there encouraged the channeling, because I was like, I think I'm hearing. They says, Paul, just say what you're hearing. Just say what you hear and stop apologizing for it. So this work has always been there for groups. And I did that group in my apartment for 18 years. Sometimes 3 people would show up, sometimes 13. People would put $10 in a basket. I wasn't looking to be known. I was a college teacher. I had another life that I was in. I was keeping my spiritual stuff in those days somewhat quiet. And now, when we do the online events, there can be, 400, a couple of thousand people there doing the work, and you can feel it online. You don't need to be in the physical room to feel the energy. You're working beyond time and space in a way that's exciting and wonderful, So I know it's changed me because the amplitude of the energy allows things to happen, allows things to move that might have gotten stuck. I mean, imagine turning a fan up on high. It's going to blow the stuff out that's been sort of embedded in there, much more so when you get a little whisk and a little breeze coming through.
Yeah. The last thing that I'm thinking about is I was very excited to see that coherence was used a lot in Resurrection. So we're the Heart Coherence Collaborative, and we talk about coherence in a specific way. But I would love to hear you talk more about what the guides mean by coherence.
Co-resonance, vibrational accord. That's my sense of it. I mean, to be in coherence with anything is to be in relationship to it. And at a level of vibrational accord, the guides would say, we're in vibrational accord with everything we see and hear and imagine or read. I mean, we're in alignment to it because it's part of our reality. And they say this level of coherence is happening in a common field or a common octave of high and low notes, and that's the reality that we know. But they say, we're tone, we're song, we're music. Any song can be played in a higher octave. And what they're doing is lifting us or transposing the music that we are to a higher octave. And then what we're in alignment or coherence with is altered. It's like if you look out the basement window, you get one view. You go up to the 50th floor, you get another view and another experience of the sky or the material world. It's like that. And I think when they talk about coherence, they're talking about a level of amplitude that we can align to in order to align to what is always true or already true. They say, you can't make anything holy, it already is, but you can deny the divine in anything.
Do the guides ever talk, just to follow up on that, do the guides ever talk about the power of our heart in our transformation?
The physical heart or the spiritual heart or what?
Either.
I mean, they talk, my experience with this, and they do talk about it some, and I don't remember what they said, to be honest. But, the divine spark or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I've got, a Hindu god up on my desk, and I've got Buddha over there. You can see there's a Jesus in the back, but the reason he's back there is there's the flame in the heart. And my experience of that and it wasn't a Jesus thing at all, it was just the experience of the burning in the heart, which first happened for me when I was in my, I guess, late 20s. And it was a knockout. It was something. And I wish I could walk around all day feeling that, and I don't. And maybe one day I'll get to again. But that, I believe, there is the true self or the divine self or the indwelling Christ. You can call it anything you want. I think that's where it expresses in this area. And I think this is what illumines us. This is what goes through us. And this is what seeks to illumine our entire being. And then they say, you can illumine the world. The light that you are illumines the world. It's not, people think that this is about getting something that you want. And maybe that there's a time for that. But finally, I think this is about being in and for the world. It's a way of being in service. The guides say, I know how I serve. It's a claim that they invite us to make. And they say how one serves is how one is most fully expressed, which is demonstrated or realized as the true self or the monad or the divine self.
Is there a specific organ that you believe is like the receiver for your channeling? Like, is it the pineal gland? Is it coming through the field, or is it just?
I don't know. My experience was often in the early days of it, something at the forehead.
Mm.
But I don't work that way anymore. Early in my days with this, when I used to try to hook up with something like a tin can to my ear with somebody, so somebody, please speak into this. There are people here. Then there was emerging, and so I think my whole energetic field is used. My body's used. My eyes sometimes change color. They go bright blue. I don't have bright blue eyes at all when I'm channeling. You know, I gesture with them. You know, I mean, there's a whole body thing that happens, but I don't know. I may never understand the mechanics of it, and I haven't really asked either. You know, maybe I should one day, but it just happens. I trust it happens. I trust that if I show up at the right time, they're going to show up too. Otherwise, there's going to be trouble. You know.
Last question. How can we support you on your journey? We're so grateful for you being here with us again.
It's kind of you. You know, people are welcome to check out my website, and there's online events. I do a monthly intensive. I'm touring again, so there'll be live events starting in February. I've got stuff. I've got stuff in March, West Coast, Pacific Northwest, Austin, lots of places, a whole calendar up there. So, you know, if you want to work with the guides in person, it's exciting. And, you know, come and check it out.
Oh, we would love to.
Yes, we
We're
would.
going to do that. We're going to check out your schedule and come join you.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we truly love you and are so grateful for you coming back on.
You're both very kind. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And
Enjoy
we're
Maui.
sending love to everybody.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you all.